paper boats. The envelope sat on Olivia Winter's kitchen counter for 3 days before she found the courage to seal it. Outside her apartment window, Seattle's persistent autumn rain tapped against the glass, creating a rhythm that matched her hesitant heartbeat. 6 months had passed since Thomas walked out of their 4-year relationship with nothing but a brief explanation and the echo of the closing door. "This isn't what I want anymore," he had said. As if their shared dreams, the apartment they'd decorated together, and the ring he'd given her on that snowy evening in December could be dismissed with a single sentence. Olivia ran her fingers over the envelope, tracing the neat handwriting that spelled out Thomas Reeves's new address in Portland. Her therapist had suggested writing everything she couldn't say to him, not necessarily to send, just to release. But something in Olivia needed him to know, needed closure that felt less like an amputation and more like a conscious goodbye. "There," she whispered, pressing a stamp into the corner. "It's done." The letter joined her stack of bills and a birthday card for her nephew. Tomorrow morning, she would drop them all in the mailbox on her way to the bookstore where she worked. Tomorrow, her words would begin their journey away from her, like paper boats set adrift on uncertain waters. Across the city in a converted warehouse apartment, Julian Hayes finished developing another set of black and white photographs. His darkroom, once his sanctuary, felt more like a mausoleum these days, preserving memories rather than creating them. At 42, he'd built his reputation on capturing the soul of Seattle's changing landscape, but lately his work felt as hollow as the rest of his life. 3 years had passed since Eliza's death, but grief had a way of distorting time. Some days it felt like yesterday, others like a lifetime ago. Their friends had mostly stopped calling, tired of his refusals to rejoin the world of the living. His agent kept reminding him about exhibition deadlines he couldn't bring himself to care about. Julian hung the last photograph to dry, a foggy morning on the waterfront, the ferries emerging like ghosts from the mist. He'd taken it on autopilot, going through the motions of being the photographer he once was. The next morning, Olivia dropped her letters into the blue mailbox on Pine Street, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She didn't know that her envelope with Thomas's address had a smudged zip code, or that the sorting machine would misread it. She couldn't know that the universe had other plans for her carefully chosen words. 4 days later, Julian collected his mail without much interest. Bills, a photography magazine, and an envelope with unfamiliar handwriting addressed to Thomas. He almost tossed it back into the outgoing mail slot, but noticed the return address was just a few neighborhoods away. No name, just an address. That evening, with a glass of whiskey beside him, Julian opened the letter that wasn't his. He told himself he was just looking for clues to find the real Thomas, but the first few lines caught him like a hook. "Thomas, I'm not writing to ask you to come back. I'm writing because there are words still living inside me that need somewhere to go." Something in her raw honesty made Julian keep reading. By the time he finished the 4-page letter, the ice that had encased his heart for 3 years had developed the faintest of cracks. Olivia's words about lost love and rebuilding weren't meant for him, but somehow they had found him anyway.
Ink and echoes. Julian stared at the letter for hours, reading and rereading Olivia's words. Her handwriting slanted slightly to the right, hurried in some places, carefully measured in others. It revealed as much as the words themselves, moments of confidence followed by vulnerability. "I don't regret loving you," she had written. "I regret that I forgot to love myself while loving you." That line haunted Julian. He thought about Eliza, about how he'd lost himself in grief after her death. Had he forgotten to love himself too? The next morning, Julian woke with the unusual feeling that he needed to do something. The letter lay on his bedside table, a visitor from someone else's life that had somehow pierced the fog of his own. He should return it, he knew that. Maybe write a quick note explaining the mix-up and be done with it. Instead, he found himself at his desk, pulling out the fine stationery Eliza had given him years ago, paper he hadn't touched since before her illness. His pen hovered over the blank page for nearly an hour before he began to write. Dear Olivia, if that's your name, I found it only once in your signature. Your letter arrived at my address, but it wasn't meant for me. There's no Thomas here. I should have stopped reading once I realized the mistake, but something in your words wouldn't let me look away. I don't know you. You don't know me. But I recognize something in your letter, the shape of a specific kind of pain. I've carried something similar for 3 years. I'm returning your letter, but before I do, I wanted to tell you that your words about rebuilding yourself, about finding the pieces that were always yours and not defined by someone else, they matter. They mattered to me today, even though I was never supposed to read them. If you're wondering, I'm not some creep who makes a habit of reading other people's mail. I'm just someone who's been sleepwalking through life for a while now, and your words were an unexpected alarm clock. Julian Hayes. He included his phone number at the bottom, then immediately regretted it, crossing it out and writing his email address instead. More distance, less pressure. He sealed both letters, her original and his response, in a new envelope and addressed it to her. When Olivia received the envelope a few days later, she felt a momentary surge of hope that quickly dissolved into confusion. The handwriting wasn't Thomas's. Inside, she found her own letter and another from someone named Julian Hayes. Her face burned with embarrassment as she realized a stranger had read her most intimate thoughts. "Oh God," she murmured, sinking onto her couch. She read Julian's letter twice, her embarrassment gradually giving way to curiosity. There was something disarming about his honesty, about the way he admitted to reading her letter while acknowledging it was wrong. And beneath his words, she sensed a profound loneliness that echoed her own. That evening, after closing the bookstore and having dinner with her roommate Daniela, Olivia sat at her laptop and composed an email. Dear Julian, thank you for returning my letter. I was mortified at first, knowing someone I've never met read words I barely had the courage to write. But your response was kind in a way I didn't expect. You mentioned carrying a similar pain for 3 years. I won't ask what happened. That feels invasive. But I'm sorry for whatever loss has shaped your life. Sometimes I think the hardest part isn't the losing itself, but learning how to carry what remains. Olivia. She hesitated before sending it, wondering if she was being foolish. But something about writing to a stranger felt liberating. There were no expectations, no history, no chance of running into Julian at the grocery store or a mutual friend's party. It was just words crossing the distance between two solitary people. Julian responded the next day, and so began a correspondence neither had anticipated. Their emails evolved from cautious and polite to increasingly honest. They wrote about their work, her love of books and writing, his photography. They shared thoughts about films they'd seen, music that moved them, the changing seasons in Seattle. But mostly, they wrote around their pain, circling it like careful cartographers mapping dangerous terrain. Julian revealed that he'd lost his wife, but not how. Olivia mentioned her broken engagement but offered few details about Thomas. 3 weeks into their correspondence, Julian sent a different kind of email. I took photographs today, real ones, not just going through the motions. There was this perfect moment at Pike Place, an elderly couple sharing a peach, juice running down their fingers, both of them laughing. I couldn't not capture it. I've attached it, though email doesn't do the print justice. I realized while developing it that it's the first photograph I've taken in years that made me feel something. I thought you might want to know that. Olivia studied the photograph for a long time. It was beautiful. The couple's weathered hands, the soft focus that made the market behind them a dreamy blur, the light catching the peach juice on their fingers. She could almost hear their laughter. She wrote back, I started writing again last week. Not just emails or journal entries, a story. It's probably terrible, but it exists now, outside of me. It's been 2 years since I wrote anything that wasn't for work or therapy. I thought you might want to know that too. As autumn deepened into winter, their emails became longer, more frequent. They began to share the difficult truths they'd held back. Julian told her about Eliza's battle with cancer, about the helplessness of watching someone you love disappear by degrees. Olivia revealed how Thomas had left her 6 weeks before their wedding for someone he'd met at work, someone he claimed to have fallen in love with instantly in a way he'd never felt with her. The worst part, she wrote, wasn't that he loved someone else. It was discovering that the future I had imagined so clearly, the one I thought we both wanted, had been nothing but my own projection. I've been afraid to trust my own vision of things ever since. Their words became bridges spanning the gaps in their broken hearts, connecting separate islands of grief.
Between the lines. By early December, Olivia found herself rushing home each evening to check her email, disappointment settling in her stomach on the rare days when Julian hadn't written. Their correspondence had expanded beyond emails to include photographs Julian sent through the mail. Small prints that arrived in elegant envelopes, each capturing something he thought might speak to her. "This is how I see the world," he wrote in a note accompanying a series of rainy day shots. Or at least, how I'm beginning to see it again. Olivia kept the photographs pinned to a corkboard above her desk, a growing collage of Julian's perspective. She sent him pages from her story in return, nervously awaiting his feedback, which was always thoughtful and encouraging. They never spoke on the phone. They never suggested meeting, though they lived less than 4 miles apart. There was an unspoken agreement that what existed between them, this exchange of words and ideas, was too fragile to risk changing its form. One evening, while having dinner with Daniela and their friend Richard, Olivia found herself checking her phone repeatedly for Julian's response to her latest email. "Earth to Olivia," said Daniela, waving a hand in front of her face. "You've been somewhere else all night." "Sorry," Olivia mumbled, putting her phone away. "Just distracted." Richard grinned. "She's got that look. There's definitely someone." "There's no one," Olivia protested, but even as she said it, she recognized the lie. There was someone, just not in the way they thought. "Spill it," Daniela insisted. "You've been different lately. Happier." Olivia hesitated. "It's complicated. I've been corresponding with someone." "Corresponding?" Richard laughed. "What century is this?" "It's just emails and letters sometimes. Nothing romantic." But later that night, Olivia stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, confronting the truth she'd been avoiding. Somewhere along the way, Julian had become more than a stranger who'd received her letter by mistake. His words had become a necessity, a daily sustenance she craved. She was falling for someone she'd never met, someone who existed for her only in words and images. Meanwhile, Julian was experiencing his own complications. His agent, Charlotte, was thrilled with his renewed creative energy, eagerly planning his first exhibition in years. But when she asked about his inspiration, he found himself reluctant to mention Olivia. "Let's just say I woke up," he told Charlotte over coffee at their favorite cafe. "No," Charlotte said, studying him closely. "There's someone, isn't there?" Julian focused on his espresso. "It's not what you think." "I think you're the most alive I've seen you since Eliza died," Charlotte said gently. "Whatever or whoever is responsible for that deserves some credit." That evening, Julian wrote a different kind of email to Olivia. "Today my agent asked what changed. Why I'm suddenly taking photographs that have soul again," her words. "I didn't know how to explain that a misdirected letter from a stranger has somehow redirected me. That your words have become a kind of compass. I keep wondering what you look like when you read my emails, if you smile at certain parts or frown at others. I imagine you in a bookstore, surrounded by stories, your hands moving over spines the way mine move over a camera, with purpose and reverence. Is it strange to miss someone you've never met?" Olivia read his email 3 times, her heart racing. She began several responses, deleting each one. Finally, she wrote, "No, it's not strange. I've been missing you all day." As Christmas approached, the boundary they'd established began to waver. Julian sent him a recording of himself playing piano, a talent he hadn't mentioned before. Olivia sent him a small wrapped package containing a vintage edition of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, her favorite novel.
For a fellow appreciator of beautiful, haunting things, she wrote in the accompanying card. On Christmas Eve, Olivia was at her parents' house in Tacoma when her phone chimed with an email notification. Julian had sent a photograph, not one of his artistic compositions, but a simple selfie. He stood in his apartment beside a small, sparsely decorated tree, raising a glass of wine toward the camera. His face was handsome, in an understated way. Kind eyes, salt and pepper hair, the beginnings of a smile that seemed out of practice. "Merry Christmas, Olivia," from the person behind the words. Her heart hammered as she studied his face, putting features to the voice she'd constructed in her mind. Before she could overthink it, Olivia escaped to her childhood bedroom and took a selfie of her own, sitting cross-legged on her old bed, surrounded by the books and photographs that had shaped her youth. "Merry Christmas, Julian," from the woman who sent a letter to the wrong place at exactly the right time. The exchange of photographs changed something between them. Their words became more direct, more daring. The question of meeting hung between them, unasked, but increasingly present.
Return address. January brought relentless rain to Seattle, the kind that seeped into bones and spirits alike. Olivia found herself thinking about Julian constantly, imagining encounters, bumping into him at Pike Place Market, spotting him at her favorite coffee shop, turning a corner to find him adjusting his camera lens to capture some fleeting urban moment. Their correspondence had evolved yet again. They now exchanged texts throughout the day, small observations, questions, photographs of their immediate surroundings. It created an illusion of shared experience, despite the physical distance they maintained. "Why haven't we met?" Daniela asked one evening as they walked home from a movie. "You've been talking to this guy for months. You know more about him than you knew about Thomas after a year of dating." Olivia pulled her coat tighter against the rain. "It's complicated." "It's not, though," Daniela insisted. "You're scared. Both of you." Olivia couldn't deny it. There was safety in their separation, in knowing Julian only through carefully chosen words and images. Meeting would introduce variables neither could control. Chemistry, or lack thereof, mannerisms that might irritate, the countless tiny revelations that come with physical presence. "What if he doesn't like who I am in person?" Olivia finally admitted. "What if I don't like who he is?" Daniela linked her arm through Olivia's. "What if you do?" That same week, Julian was having a similar conversation with his brother Marcus, over beers at their favorite pub. "Let me get this straight," Marcus said, leaning forward. "You've been corresponding with this woman for months. You're clearly crazy about her, but you won't actually meet her?" Julian rotated his glass slowly. "It's not that simple." "It is that simple. You're just making it complicated because you're scared." "Wouldn't you be, after Eliza?" Marcus's expression softened. "It's been 3 years, Jules, and from everything you've told me, Olivia isn't asking you to forget Eliza. She's just offering you a chance at something new." Julian knew his brother was right. Whatever existed between him and Olivia deserved a chance to breathe in the real world. But every time he considered suggesting they meet, a paralyzing fear took hold. Not just of rejection, but of inadequacy, of being less than the person his words had portrayed. The decision was made for them on a rainy Tuesday in late January. Julian was at Elliott Bay Book Company researching photography texts for a workshop he was planning when he spotted a familiar name on an employee nameplate: Olivia Winters. His heart nearly stopped as he realized this was her bookstore, the one she had mentioned in dozens of emails. Almost Olivia. He almost left immediately, but something kept him rooted to the spot. He watched her from behind a display of new releases, her dark hair pulled back in a loose bun, her graceful movements as she shelved books, the way she smiled as she helped a customer. She was exactly as he had imagined, yet completely different, a contradiction that left him breathless. After 20 minutes of internal debate, Julian approached the counter. Olivia looked up, her customer service smile in place. Can I help you find something? There was no recognition in her eyes. Of course not. She'd seen only one photograph of him months ago. I'm looking for... Julian paused, courage deserting him. Do you have any books on night photography? Olivia nodded. Follow me. She led him to the photography section, professional and polite, but nothing more. Julian watched her select several volumes, explaining the merits of each. Her voice was exactly as he had imagined, warm, slightly husky, animated when discussing books she loved. This one's my personal favorite, she said, handing him a collection of urban night scenes. Thank you, Julian said. Taking the book, I appreciate your help. Olivia. Something in the way he said her name made her pause. She looked at him more carefully, her brow furrowing slightly. I'm sorry. Have we met? Julian's heart hammered. Not exactly. I'm Julian. Julian Hayes. The color drained from Olivia's face. Julian? I didn't know you worked here, he explained quickly. I mean, I knew you worked at a bookstore, but not which one. I was just looking for some resources and then I saw your name and... Olivia took a step back, her expression a mixture of shock and something else. Fear? Excitement? Julian couldn't tell. I should have left, he said. Or at least warned you. I'm sorry. No, Olivia said, finding her voice. It's okay. It's just unexpected. An awkward silence stretched between them, filled with months of shared confidences that suddenly seemed both too intimate and too distant. My shift ends at 6, Olivia finally said. There's a cafe next door. If you wanted to talk. Julian nodded, relief washing over him. He spent the next 2 hours pretending to browse books while his mind raced with everything he wanted to say to her and everything he was suddenly afraid to say. At 6 o'clock, they sat across from each other at a small table in the window of the cafe, steam rising from their mugs, rain creating patterns on the glass beside them. In person, their carefully constructed dialogue faltered. They made awkward small talk about the weather, the cafe's music selection, the books Julian had purchased. This is strange, isn't it? Talking like strangers when we're not, Olivia finally said. Julian nodded. I know more about your childhood dreams than I do about what you take in your coffee. Oat milk and 1 sugar, she offered with a small smile. And you take yours black. You remembered. I remember everything you've told me, Olivia admitted. That's what makes this so... terrifying? Julian suggested. I was going to say surreal, but terrifying works too. They both laughed, and something in the tension between them eased. Julian found himself telling her about his day before he'd found her at the bookstore, and Olivia shared a funny interaction with a customer. Gradually, their conversation found its rhythm again, though different from the one they'd established through writing. As the cafe was closing, they stood awkwardly on the sidewalk, under the shelter of the awning, the rain still falling steadily around them. I live that way, Olivia said, gesturing east. I'm west, Julian replied, pointing in the opposite direction. Another silence fell, heavy with unasked questions. Would it be all right if I walked you home? Julian finally asked. Olivia nodded, and they set off together, sharing an umbrella, their shoulders occasionally brushing. By the time they reached her apartment building, they'd found something close to their written ease again, discussing a photography exhibition Julian had mentioned in an email, debating the ending of a novel they'd both read. This is me, Olivia said, stopping in front of a converted warehouse with large windows. Thank you for walking me home. Thank you for not running away when I appeared at your workplace without warning. Olivia smiled. I probably should have. Probably, Julian agreed. They stood looking at each other in the soft glow of the building's entrance lights. Julian thought about all the things he had told her in writing that he didn't know how to say aloud. Olivia thought about how different it was to see emotions cross his face
rather than imagine them from his words. "I should go up," Olivia said, though she made no move to leave. "You should," Julian agreed, equally still. "Would you like to have dinner sometime? A real dinner? Not just coffee after accidentally running into each other?" Julian's smile transformed his face, erasing years of grief in an instant. "I'd like that very much." As Olivia watched him walk away, umbrella tilted against the rain, she felt a strange mixture of loss and possibility. Something had ended tonight. Their correspondence would never be quite the same. But something else had begun, something undefined and fragile and real.
Postscript. Spring arrived in Seattle with characteristic uncertainty. Days of brilliant sunshine interrupted by sudden showers. Trees hesitantly unfurling new leaves only to have them battered by unexpected wind. Olivia thought it an apt metaphor for what had developed between her and Julian over the past 3 months. Their first official date had been awkward, both trying too hard, overthinking every word, painfully aware of the gap between their written selves and their physical reality. Their second date was better. By the third, they had begun to find a new rhythm, different from their correspondence, but with echoes of the connection that had drawn them together. Now, as April coaxed cherry blossoms from the trees lining her street, Olivia sat on her apartment's small balcony, Julian beside her, both of them watching the sunset transform the Seattle skyline. They had fallen into a comfortable routine. Sunday mornings at farmers' markets, weekday evenings spent cooking together or exploring new restaurants. Long walks through the city where Julian would occasionally stop to photograph something that caught his eye. "I have something for you," Julian said, reaching into his bag. He handed her a small, wrapped package. Inside was a handcrafted journal, its cover made of soft leather, embossed with a design of intertwined branches. "Open it," Julian encouraged. Olivia flipped through the blank pages until she reached the very last one. There, Julian had pasted the first page of her original letter, the one that had gone astray and found him instead of Thomas. "You kept it?" Olivia asked, tracing her handwriting with her fingertip. "Just this page," Julian said. "I returned the rest, remember? But this page, it changed the course of my life. I thought you might want to have it back, as a reminder of where we started." Olivia leaned against him, their shoulders touching. "Sometimes I try to imagine what would have happened if I had addressed that envelope correctly, if Thomas had received it instead of you." Julian was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret that he didn't?" "No," Olivia said without hesitation. "Never. But I do think about how many things had to align for us to find each other. One smudged digit in a zip code. You opening a letter that wasn't yours. Both of us being brave enough to write back." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city. So much had changed since that rainy autumn evening when Olivia had sealed her letter to Thomas. She had changed, becoming stronger, more certain of herself. Her writing had flourished. She was now halfway through a novel and had published 2 short stories in literary journals. Julian had changed too. His photography exhibition in March had been a triumph, showcasing work that critics described as imbued with renewed hope and finding beauty in recovery. He had emerged from the shadow of grief, not by forgetting Eliza, but by finding a way to carry her memory alongside new joy. Their relationship wasn't perfect. They argued sometimes about small things, like Julian's tendency to withdraw when stressed, or Olivia's habit of avoiding difficult conversations. They were still learning each other's physical presence, still discovering the differences between the people they'd revealed in writing and the more complex reality of who they were. But there was a foundation to what they were building, one constructed of words exchanged during those months of correspondence, of honesty offered before either had reason to trust the other, of connection that had formed despite the absence of physical proximity. "I've been thinking," Julian said, taking her hand, "about that letter, about words and their power." "What about them?" Olivia asked, watching his expression in the fading light. "We fell in love with each other's words first. Before appearances, before physical chemistry, before all the things people usually base relationships on. We knew each other's minds and hearts before we ever shared the same space." Olivia nodded. "It was backwards, wasn't it? Most people meet, feel attraction, then gradually reveal themselves. We revealed everything, then met." "Not everything," Julian said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "There are still things I haven't told you." "Like what?" Olivia felt a flicker of apprehension. Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a single sheet of Julian's stationery, the same paper he had used for his first response to her misdirected letter. "Dear Olivia," she read out loud, "there are 3 things I know with absolute certainty. The light is always best just before sunset. Grief and joy can occupy the same space, and I have fallen completely in love with you." Her voice faltered as she continued reading silently, tears filling her eyes. When she finished, she looked up to find Julian watching her intently, his expression a mixture of hope and vulnerability. "Julian," she whispered, "this is beautiful." "I mean every word, especially the last part." Olivia glanced down at the final lines of his letter. "I'm not asking for forever yet. I'm just asking for tomorrow, and the day after that, and as many days as you're willing to give me. I'm asking for the chance to love you in person as completely as I first loved you in words." She folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into its envelope. "You know, for a photographer, you have quite a way with words," he smiled. "Only with you." As the last light faded from the sky and the city lights began to twinkle below them, Olivia leaned forward and kissed him, a gesture that conveyed what words, for once, could not. Later that night, as Julian slept beside her, Olivia slipped out of bed and went to her desk. She opened the journal he had given her and began to write on the first blank page. "Dear Julian," she wrote, "this isn't the end of our story. It's just the beginning.